All right, let's get started. Today we're going to be talking about energy. The number one complaint that I feel like most women have is just being tired, right? Not feeling good, having no energy. So I want to make sure we dive into all the potential causes and sources of that and also give you some tips to fix it. Let everyone jump on for a second. Hopefully you're not feeling too tired yourself today. But we'll talk about it. Energy, how to get more of it. All right. Hopefully comments will come up in real time. They've been a little sluggish the last couple, but I'll try and get to as many questions as I possibly can as we go. But today we are talking about energy, low energy, not having enough energy, what causes it, what you can do about it. I'm going to give you simple things that you can start right away, and we'll also do some deeper dives because I feel like this is a big deal for a lot of women, and men too, but primarily I work with women. Just not feeling like you have the energy to get through the day, right? It's the number one complaint I have from most women who I work with. And then it's about finding what's causing that energy deficiency for you, right? So let's talk about the two kind of different types of energy drains, what those feel like, and start to kind of identify based on the way I'm describing these, which one do you think you are? And feel free to tell me in the comments, do you think you're number one or number two? And then as we go through some of the causes of fatigue and solutions for that, I'll try and highlight which one goes best with each type of fatigue, because both of them suck, right? Like one maybe more than the other, but it's no fun to feel like you're dragging through life and that everything feels harder. So I really consider both of them equally as detrimental to your health. They just typically have different causes when we start to look at the root cause. So fatigue number one is you're tired. Maybe you're not sleeping great. You're tired throughout the day, but you're still functioning. You just feel like everything's a little bit harder, right? Maybe you really want to nap midnight during the middle of the day. But then when it comes to bedtime, all of a sudden you get your second wind, right? Then you're not sleeping great because you kind of get your second wind and then you don't fully rest through the night. That's the earlier stages of what's known as adrenal fatigue or adrenal insufficiency. There's a lot of different names and opinions on what that should be called. But kind of phase one of fatigue is where you're really just starting to enter into some adrenal insufficiency. You just don't feel great, but you're still able to get through majority of your day. But then you get that second wind and you're not sleeping well. That's number one. If that sounds like you, let me know. You can just put a number one in the comments. Or there's number two. And that's that deep, heavy fatigue where you feel like it doesn't matter how much I sleep, I'm still exhausted. It really is impacting function. Like there's things you just can't really do anymore. You feel like you just want to stay in bed all day if you could. When you get up and try and force yourself to do stuff, it's really, really hard. And you really never get a good boost of energy through the day. You're pretty much dead tired. Start of the day, right to the end. And at this point, you probably are sleeping, maybe sleeping a lot, but still not feeling rested. So I call that really heavy fatigue. And if you have that fatigue, you know what I mean, right? Like your whole body feels like, oh my God, everything's really hard. That's the second phase. That's where we're getting into some of the maybe bigger, and we're going to talk about EBV fatigue. Exactly. Some of the bigger root causes that might be contributing to that. So we're going to go through both of them, because I think it's important. I think probably every single person watching has one or the other, and then giving you some simple tips of things that you can do about both of those. So let's start with the kind of more general fatigue through the day, that boost of energy at night, not feeling like you're completely depleted, but just really noticing you're not feeling as good. These first three causes could potentially be the thing that can turn it around for you, right? When we catch it in that phase, it's a whole lot easier to correct, but I see a lot of number twos, so we'll get there too. Again, when the earlier you are into this level of fatigue, the earlier it's going to be to kind of right the ship, right? To turn it around and start feeling better. And the first three tips I'm going to give you are pretty simple, but they're things I find over and over and over again that people are not doing that are huge causes of fatigue. So hopefully for you, it's as simple as fixing these couple of things and then noticing how much better you feel. And the first one is being underfed. So either you're not eating enough or you're not eating enough of the right things. In particular, most people, again, I'm going to reference women just because that's where my heart is, women's healthcare. Most women are not getting nearly enough food but especially protein. So one of the main causes of that fatigue through the day, you're also not fueling your adrenals, you're not giving your body enough of those nutrients to really do the functions it needs to do, is because you're not eating enough. So I want to challenge you. Most likely this is you, right? Rarely do I meet a person off the bat who isn't really intentionally tracking their macros, who knows if they're getting enough protein. But I want to challenge you for a day or two. If you have like MyFitnessPal, or there's plenty of free apps on your phone that you can just generally, just track your macros. You don't have to get obsessive about it. I just want you to get an idea on an average day without, intentionally adding extra protein. How many grams of protein are you getting every single day? And what I've noticed from the women I have do this is most women are getting about 50 grams of protein a day, which is like half of what you need. The average amount of protein for a woman who's just, average woman, not even working out too hard. If you're working out hard, you need it even more. We should be striving for 80 to 100 grams of protein per day. And rarely is that happening. Where do you show the macros? So when you have an app, it'll help you track it for you, right? So if you'll just put in what you ate, it'll kind of give you a general idea. And again, we don't need this to be super specific and get into all the weeds with it. I just want you to get a general idea on your average day. How much are you getting? That way, okay, I'm only getting 50 grams. I need to at least get to 80. How do I find sources to add that extra amount? But I am telling you this, for a lot of people, as soon as we correct this, all of a sudden it's like, yes, I can get through my day. My energy's back. I'm not having that crash. I feel like my brain's working better. Like, there are some really cool things that happen just from fueling your body with enough protein and the right sources, right? That's a topic for a whole other day. We could talk for an hour about that. But we're not looking for crappy sources. You don't want synthetic, we're not looking at these energy bars. You really want good, healthy sources of protein. But your goal is to get at least 80 grams of protein per day, and notice how much that changes. And also making sure you're getting a good variety, right, of proteins. And then the second piece of maybe being underfed is not getting enough vegetables. So I'm sure you've heard, but everyone thinks it's still an insane comment, that you should be getting 8 to 10 servings of vegetables per day. Nutritionally, that's the truth. But honestly, tell me in the comments, do you get 8 to 10 servings of vegetables a day? I certainly don't, right? I know I have to really work hard to get that. But to get enough energy from our food, we really need to be nourishing our bodies. And it's 80 to 100 grams of protein, and try to get 8 to 10 servings of vegetables per day. And if we want to get really into it, it really should be different colored vegetables per day, right? Getting the variety of nutrients from eating the rainbow and getting lots of variety, and eating local as best as you can, eating seasonal as best as you can. But again, don't try and make this too complicated. If you just need to start somewhere, the two things I want you to focus on is 80 to 100 grams of protein, but knowing where you're at on an average day. And then increasing your vegetable servings, right? If you're getting 1 to 2 servings, maybe 10's a stretch for you. Great, double it. Let's get to 4 this week, or let's get to 6 this week, right? Start somewhere and then move into, and the carbs are tricky too. Yeah, there's so many things that can go into choosing the right meal plan. And that's one of the things that I've learned over the years is every meal plan is not right for every person, right? I typically have women on completely different plans based on their patterns and their body. But things that we know we need is enough nutrients, right? Whether you're following a low carb or a high protein or a keto or whatever, that irrelevant of that, you need nutrition. You need building blocks for energy. So for today's talk, that's all I want you focusing on. Are you getting enough, and are you getting enough variety? To make this really simple, so starting in April, we're doing our Spring Clean Challenge. It is a completely free challenge, but it's going to give you 21 days of meal plans, recipes, grocery shopping lists. You'll get to see, what does 80 grams of protein look like in a meal? How can I get a variety of colors and vegetables and servings? We've created the meal plans to really be an energy boosting meal plan. So if you're somebody who struggles with even knowing what that looks like, you're like, that sounds great. I have no idea how to make that work. The Spring Clean Challenge will be amazing for you. I'll have links put out today. There'll be links in my bio. I'll put links in the comments. Again, completely free to sign up. 21 days of just giving you really good energy specific meal plans. We'll have some movement in there. I'll teach you some of the things that I kind of do daily to increase my energy. really great way just to get some specific recommendations, because I know the food piece can be really overwhelming for people. So we've tried to simplify it with that challenge. So I would love for all of you to join me on that. So starting this week alone, you're going to track your macros, you're going to add your variety, but if you need some extra help with the food piece, that would be a great next place to go. So cause number one of your fatigue, I will almost guarantee you are not getting enough whole food nutrition. Your body is undernourished and does not have the energy to perform all the things that you need it to do. So start there and see what happens. See the difference that makes. So not eating enough. Number two goes perfectly in line with this, not being hydrated. Now, there are two things we consider when it comes to hydration. One is the actual amount of water that you're drinking, right? Again, in the comments, do you think that you get enough water on a daily basis? Yes or no? And do you even know what the appropriate amount of water is per person on a daily basis? If you know that answer, put that in the comments too. You should be getting half of your body weight in ounces of water every single day. Half of your body weight, which for most people is somewhere between 80 and 100 ounces of water. So that 80 and 100 is like a theme that comes up, right? Protein, water, even fibers. That's a good number to kind of try and strive for. But if you're not getting, majority of you, at least 80 ounces of water per day, you are dehydrated, right? It requires half your body weight in ounces just to replenish what you go through on a daily basis. In fact, you might even need more if you're active, if it's hot, those different things. But most people, as a starting place, are not getting nearly enough water, enough hydration. And being dehydrated causes major fatigue, causes mood issues, causes headaches. Some of these things that you might be dealing with every day could be as simple as you're not eating enough and you're not getting enough water. But we rarely just sit down and evaluate those things for ourselves, right? Look at, what am I really getting and how much more do I need to add to make sure that I'm hitting what's required for my energetic capacity, right? Your body needs that fuel. Doesn't drink water because you have to pee. Time it, right? Like I was talking to a lady yesterday. She's like, I'm literally on a water schedule to make sure that I can drink enough, but don't have to be up all night peeing or have to run out of the class. You have to time those things. Maybe it's 20 ounces within your first 30 minutes of waking up so that you can pee before you have to leave for work, and then timing another 20 ounces as soon as you get done from school so that you have, a good hour or two there, another 20 ounces sometime around like 6 or 7 p.m. and then finishing with your last little bit that you're just sipping on through the day. You just have to plan these things. And it is that way with most healthy changes, right? You've got to think about your food and your planning. You've got to think about when you're going to get your hydration in. You've got to be able to track these things so you know at the end of the day, did I hit my goal or not? Because just kind of going willy-nilly through the day, I can make it halfway through the day and realize I've only had 10 ounces of water if I don't have my strategy in place, if I don't have my, cups filled right beside me. So definitely a little bit of forethought needs to happen because it's hugely important. I mean, I cannot stress to you for all things how important making sure you are well hydrated is. In addition to making sure you're also getting the right hydration to your cells by having good mineral balance. The other side of this, sometimes I'll have people who are like, I drink tons of water. That doesn't necessarily mean you're fully hydrated if it's not getting into the cells, right? We can lose a lot of that water. We can retain a lot of that water. And a lot of people, because of our soil, different medications, birth control, hormone imbalances, all of these reasons that really deplete our minerals, our amino acids, you might be drinking quite a bit, but you might still have signs and symptoms of dehydration like low energy because it's not getting into your cells. So one of the things I'm obsessed with that I put in my water, it's actually in my water right now, is the Beam Micro Boost. I've been using this for the last several months, and I've noticed a significant difference in my energy, in the quality of my skin. Like, I love the way that feels. It's an ounce that you put in water once a day. It doesn't taste like anything. It doesn't taste bad, but it has 70 different minerals. It has amino acids. It has some of your B vitamins in it. It's just a really simple way to get a lot of good hydrating components in one little ounce of water instead of having to take, I talk to people who are taking magnesium and they're taking zinc and they're taking trace minerals and they're taking all these other things. Instead of taking 6 things, you can get a lot of that in one place. I'm obsessed with it. I highly recommend it for everybody. I'll throw some links for that too if you've never heard of that. I'll link how I take it and where we get it from, but that is a great way. Add it to your water. You know you're increasing your capacity for hydration, and lacking minerals and amino acids are directly tied to low energy and headaches and cramping and poor sleep quality. So potentially it's the water, but also that mineral balance that's making you so tired. So adding that in could make a tremendous difference. I love Celtic sea salt. You'll see some of my videos. I do like the adrenal tonic that has Celtic sea salt in it. However, you're not getting a large variety, right? You're getting certain minerals, which are wonderful, but you're not necessarily getting like the amino acids and the other things with it. So great, but for different reasons, right? Helps with hydration. I just really love the way I feel when I do the micro boost because it has so many different things in there. Can coffee count as your water? Nope. If it's water, it has to be actual straight water. Great question. Not coffee, not tea. It really has to be water. You can add, like I said, if you're doing like an electrolyte or something else, that's okay. But anything that's not truly water, you're not getting the same hydration benefit as you would like coffee or tea wouldn't count. So those count as your liquid ounces, but not your hydration ounces. Great questions. Okay, so just to recap, those are the two simplest things. If you're the person who's like, man, I'm just like not feeling great, I don't know what's going on, what could I be missing? Try those things first, right? Everyone always wants like, well, what else should I do? Is there a supplement? What else can I take? And I love all of that stuff, but for most of you, lifestyle can correct probably 80% of what's going on if we just change those things. And then we can supplement, then we can do protocols for what's still lingering, but start there first. Now we're going to move into some of the deeper fatigue, that heavy fatigue, like what's causing that, like I just don't even feel like I can function kind of fatigue. And the next one I'm going to talk about is kind of a blend of the two. But there is a very real thing that I am noticing over and over and over again with people more now than ever, which is called screen fatigue. And you are watching right now on a screen. But I know for me, since going more virtual and doing a lot of stuff on a computer for, the first 10 years of my career, I was never on a screen, right? Everything was in person. I never had to be on a screen. Social media wasn't as big. Like I really was never on a screen. And now, even though I have to be, I can very much tell it drains my energy. So I have to be very protective of knowing what I have to do, right, for my work, for the commitments that I have, and then being really careful on the outside of that, not to over screen my brain, because there are tons of studies linking too much screen time. And you'll notice this in your kids. I notice it in my kids, but also myself, right? We always talk about kids on too much screen. I know for me, at the end of a day of being on a screen, I'm a little bit moody. My eyes are hurting, my head's hurting, I'm fatigued, I feel drained, because you're getting, so much input. There's psychological stress, there's physical stress on our eyes. That screen fatigue is a very real thing. And I don't think that as adults, we realize how much time we're spending on these screens. So especially if you work on a screen and then you might not even notice throughout the evening, you're still picking up your phone, you're still scrolling, you're still looking at this stuff. There are some of you that are spending majority of your waking hours somewhere around a screen. Our bodies weren't designed for that. That is freaking exhausting. So I really encourage you, one, notice how much time you're spending just on an average day, right? Just be aware of it. We're not shaming, we're not guilting ourselves about it. We're just noticing like, oh crap, I spent about 11 hours on a screen today, which sounds like a huge number, but for majority of us who have to work on a screen, that's not an unrealistic day for us, right? So how much time are you currently spending on a screen? And I want you to be really conscious about narrowing that. Are you going to make a hard stop that 2 hours before bed, you turn it all off, right? I turn the screen off, I turn the phone off, after 8 p.m., not answering messages, whatever it is that you need to do to protect your brain, your eyes, and your mental health from that screen fatigue is real. This is a big deal. Equally as important, I believe, as food and hydration. Protect your brain from all of these wonderful technologies, but that our bodies were never designed to deal with at the time and capacity that we're using them. So I really want everyone to be aware of their screen time and then start to narrow. How can you choose to narrow the amount of time you spend in front of a screen? That's huge. Next, my two favorite topics, mental fatigue. Okay, yes. All the fatigue from a screen, but the screen is the catalyst too, right? Typically you have these other things going on under the surface, and then being on the screen just like makes everything feel worse and heavier. and EMFs and yes, all the things that contribute to that. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the latter phases of that adrenal fatigue. So the adrenal fatigue that's heavy. Doesn't matter if you sleep or not, you're still exhausted. You can sleep 10 hours and when you wake up, all you want to do is go back to bed. Things are hard. You can even think about wanting to work out. You're like, oh, that sounds terrible. Or when you do exert yourself, maybe you do a little workout or you go for a walk and you feel like it just drains you and you have to recover the rest of the day. That's that deep, heavy fatigue. And typically there are two main causes. Now there are plenty, but consistently I will come across two things that are happening when somebody has that deep level of fatigue. The first one is you have probably transitioned into pretty full-on adrenal insufficiency. So the way the adrenals respond to physical and emotional stress is at first you'll flare cortisol, right? You'll have that high stress response. You'll have that wired but tired. You'll have that for a couple of years. But over time, because typically when we're feeling that, we're still pushing ourselves. We're not changing anything. We're not eating more. We're not hydrating. We're still sitting on a screen, right? We haven't fixed any of the things that we should have fixed. Eventually, they get even more fatigued and you transition from that higher cortisol into that low, drained cortisol state. So when we check for adrenal function, we check the cortisol curve of the adrenals, and this is the person who has a pretty flat curve. Barely any bump up, barely any spikes in cortisol through the day. This is heavy, heavy adrenal fatigue. And that's the difference in those symptoms, right? Like I'm tired, but I can function versus I really don't even feel like I can get through my day. That's when you've transitioned into that latter phase. Now, the thing with adrenals, and I talk about adrenals a lot, and I feel like they're incredibly important, but the adrenals are never your first problem. Right? Just like the thyroid is never the first problem, they are responding to the environment. So if I ever find, a lot of people will come to me with a Dutch test. If I ever find adrenal fatigue or adrenal insufficiency on a Dutch test, my first question is, what has been draining your energy, right? Super important to know your adrenal patterns and your hormone patterns, and those have to be corrected. But if we don't find the thing or things that have been draining those adrenals, I can give you the best adrenal support in the world. They might not get better. You can take an adaptogen for years and it might not feel a whole lot better because the source of that fatigue, the source of that stress on your adrenals hasn't been corrected. And the number one source I find when I see adrenal fatigue is some type of chronic infection. I've already seen multiple EBV questions because you know that's my favorite thing to talk about. Chronic infections in general, and there are more than just Epstein-Barr, but Epstein-Barr is the one I find most often because it's least diagnosed. It's not checked for. It's not managed well, which means it's allowed to run rampant in most people's bodies for years, if not decades, before you realize that you have a chronic viral load, which means over, let's say for my case, I guarantee I had it for at least 20 years before I ever knew that I did. In that 20 years, it had time to wreak havoc on all of these other symptoms. So my adrenals were tanked, my hormones were tanked, I had additional infections in my gut because of the time of stress my body was under before I found my true root cause, right? So I know there's a lot of people out there right now talking about adrenals and talking about thyroid, and that's important. I talk about it too, but it's more important to find the thing that has altered the environment, which over and over and over again, we identify as some type of chronic infection, especially Epstein-Barr. Now, it can also be other infections in the gut, H. pylori, Klebsiella. We could have a fungal infection. We can have a parasitic infection. We can have Lyme. There's lots of other ones, right? It's not just Epstein-Barr, but I feel like Epstein-Barr is the one that's just rampant right now. And for whatever your belief system is on all of the things over the last 3-4 years with other viruses and all of that, whatever the reason be, more people are in an Epstein-Barr reactivation now than I've ever seen in my whole career. Usually I would see a lot of chronic infection, but not necessarily fully reactivated. We are seeing more and more reactivated viral load than I've ever seen. And I think it has a lot to do with what our immune systems have had to go through these last couple of years, and just making some major changes, being exposed to new viruses can also really reactivate Epstein-Barr. So I choose for that to be one of the first things we check, because I'm noticing it's really, really highly linked to these people who are coming with that just sense of deep, deep fatigue. So if you have that deep fatigue, right, if you're the person who's like, I can't function, I can't handle this anymore, the two things I really encourage you do is number one, if you've never been checked for Epstein-Barr, highly recommend, right? Because if you are, especially if you're in a reactivation of Epstein-Barr, an early antigen, that's a big deal. Nothing else is going to fix itself until we get out of that early antigen. I mean, that's just the heaviness of what that viral load does really slows down the rest of the healing process. Or if you've been tested and haven't done anything about it, right? I find that a lot. People message me all the time saying, well, I've been tested. My doctor said it's no big deal, so I haven't really done anything for it. What do I do now? Really start investigating what the next steps are to start weakening that viral load, right? So we have the Epstein-Barr bundle. I have the Epstein-Barr masterclass. I'm actually about to, this is kind of a sneak peek, in May, I'm going to launch a really interactive like Epstein-Barr boot camp, which would be great for anyone who's struggling with any of these things. But getting tested or starting something to weaken that viral load if you've never would be a great place to start for Epstein-Barr. And then investigating how has that impacted my adrenal function, my hormones, all these other places that have now taken so much strain from being in a chronic viral infection. Those places also need to be corrected, but you always want to start with the immune system piece of the puzzle, with the infection, because the adrenals, the hormones, the thyroid, those will be so much harder to correct if we haven't dealt with the immune system piece first. That is always number one. Diatomaceous earth, food grade, charcoal, monolaurin, high doses. Those are all great things. That's not exactly the protocols I typically use. It also really depends what phase you're in, right? Are you in a chronic viral load? Are you in a reactivated viral load? Are you in an infectious viral load? The things that I will choose to use will be different based on those, but monolaurin's a great one. I love any of the adaptogenic mushrooms are always great. That's a great starting place, right? As long as you're doing something, it's better than nothing. And those are all really great choices. Yes, perfect. Okay, let me see if there's any other questions. Go ahead and drop any questions that you have. I know it's hard to kind of navigate through some of these questions, so I'll come back if there's anything that I miss. Seeing some people who use the Beam stuff, that's wonderful. Okay, so let's wrap this up. So biggest things are, if you haven't looked at your lifestyle pieces of the puzzle first, if you haven't looked at your food, if you haven't looked at your hydration, if you haven't looked at your mineral balance, if you haven't, really narrowed in your screen time, those are always the best places to start, right? You cannot over supplement for poor lifestyle. You can't. Everyone wants to, right? Everyone wants the magic cure that they can take and change nothing. It's just not going to happen. Look at your lifestyle. If you want help with that, the spring challenge is going to be amazing. So 21 days of meal plans and recipes. We'll have some gentle movement for toning. We'll have some stress management built into there. You'll have some tips and tricks to help with energy all throughout 21 days, and it's totally free. So sign up for that. There's no reason not to. I think that would be a great place for everybody to start and get some really specific just guidance through making those changes. But if you've done those things, right, if you're the person who's like, I feel like I do pretty good on that and I still feel exhausted, your next step is testing for that root cause. Is it Epstein-Barr? If you have Epstein-Barr labs, but no one's really helped you navigate through that, feel free to send me a message, put a comment down here. I'll reach out and help you figure out what your first step should be if you do have an active viral load, because if that's not properly managed, it can feel like nothing else is working well. So do not forget to really look for that root cause, or potentially it's a different infection, right? If you have gut issues, it might be a good idea to look at the gut stuff. But if you're somebody who is at that place, like I've tried all the other things and I'm still really struggling, reach out, send me a message, put a comment. I will make sure that I reach back out and help you figure out what your best next steps are, because it's not the same for everybody. And that's the thing I love, but that also makes more of this functional medicine work complicated, is there is no one answer for everybody. We really have to figure out in your specific situation, what's your root cause, right? Mine was Epstein-Barr. I see it a lot, but maybe yours is different. And then from there, how has your body had to adapt? What's going on with your adrenals? What's going on with your hormones? And really just connecting all of those pieces is the protocol, right? Is the way you get your energy back. You feel better. We take care of all these infections, but it is person specific. So feel free to reach out, ask questions. You're always welcome to DM me on any of my social media platforms, respond here in the comments, and I'll go back to those as well. But the 5 things, recap, we're going to eat enough food. We're going to aim for 80 grams of protein, and we're going to eat a variety of colorful vegetables. Again, trying to get to that 8 to 10 servings per day. sign up for the spring challenge. I'll help you get that. Number 2, we're going to be hydrated, half our body weight in ounces of water every single day. If you have to time it, set alarms, get bigger cups, whatever you need to do to make sure that happens. And then adding something like the Beam Minerals or the Micro Boost to make sure you're getting the good cellular hydration that you need. That's a game changer for a lot of people. Number 3, we're minimizing our screen time. Screen fatigue is a real thing and it is melting our brains in real time. So let's do our best to minimize that as much as we can. I encourage you to at least do a hard stop 2 hours before bed, no screens, allow your nervous system to chill out before you're expecting it to rest and get energy. So 2 hours before bed, we're really gonna make a conscious effort not to be on the screens anymore. And then if you have that deep, heavy fatigue, testing Epstein-Barr, looking at adrenal function, looking for other chronic infections, which I find in my practice to be the number 1 cause of deep fatigue, is the chronic infections that then lead to imbalances in adrenals, hormone function. So there's lots of options. There's lots of things you can get started with right away, providing you guys lots of resources. But again, feel free to ask any questions that you have, reach out, and I will try and get back to any questions that I missed. But thank you guys for hanging out with me for 30 minutes today, and I'll be back next week with some different live topics.